We are Rogue Media Sports.
It is the Doomsday podcast. And as someone was pointing out, very aptly named, and I saw you, Ed, commenting on that, the name of our podcast. And of course, we did it to honor the Cowboys. We didn't realize it would be feel like Doomsday every single game now. The Cowboys in a funk and lose to fall to 3-5 in Atlanta. And Ed, even though this was supposed to be like a horrible pass rush, right? They had like 7 sacks the entire season. It reminded me, I can't remember the tackle that allowed like 1,000,000 sacks in that game, but I started having flashbacks to Atlanta, just hitting Dak and getting the pass rush, and another awful loss for the Cowboys on a lot of levels. I mean, think about it, Ed. Even going into the fourth quarter, we had a lot of different ways to go with this. And then on top of it now, Dak with a hamstring injury says it's something he's never felt before, says he's a quick healer, but of course doesn't know if he'll be able to go next week. So there's really help is not on the way. Maybe Micah Parsons will show up or Deron Bland one of these days. But for now, this continues to be futility. And that's the Dak injury now adds even, a more painful thing to the season.
Yeah, it's really kind of ironic that, Dak Prescott in this game finally honored his vow that he's made multiple times this year of using his mobility to advantage, believing that he still had something to offer the offense as a dual threat quarterback, as a runner. And he takes off in the second quarter and has a 22-yard run. The Cowboys' first 20-yard run of the year comes from their quarterback. They're the only team to that point that did not have a 20-yard run. And he emerges unscathed from that. But in the third quarter, throwing an out pass to Jalen Brooks, who makes a diving catch on the sideline, Dak Prescott felt his right hamstring, caused him some pain, took himself out of the game, did not return, and now his status for next week's home game against the Eagles, when the Cowboys now begin this series of games where trying to recover from a 3-5 start, they actually have 4 home games of their next 5, although they haven't won a home game yet and have suffered some of the most humiliating losses there this year. And now, pending an MRI tomorrow, Dak Prescott's status is to be determined. And then the Cowboys would face the question of, well, do they go ahead and, go with Cooper Rush, who's proven capable of winning games? He's 4-1 as a starting quarterback, replacing an injured Dak Prescott. Or do they give Trey Lance, a player that they need to evaluate before they make a roster decision on him for next year? Do they give him a chance? Maybe that's not a consideration now that Dak's, signed to a 4-year contract, the richest player in the game. Maybe the decision's already made on Trey Lance, but it would be interesting to see what consideration, if any, Mike McCarthy gives to that possibility.
Yeah, and, in addition to Dak's injury, CeeDee Lamb injures his shoulder, is driven he falls on his shoulder, and you have to admire, and I saw you tweeting about it, Ed, of course, late in the game, you're firing off, very intriguing and interesting analysis. I am firing off jokes, certainly not about injuries, but
you did have one of your better jokes, one of your better Twitter jokes. Go on, repeat it, share it with the audience. If you don't remember, I do. There's so few, I can remember it.
I just think something I said, and you never know which joke might take off or not. This would seem to really take off. I just said the Cowboys need McCarthy to get called in for jury duty. and I think it hit at the appropriate time where there was probably a lot of anger toward McCarthy. And so this, it seemed to resonate with our people out there. So anyway, so they've got a lot that they're dealing with. And Ed, this is, they fall to 3-5, and this was a game they really needed to have. And like you say, it's not like it used to be that a long homestand type situation or a lot of home games would bode well for this team, but they haven't played well at home. And even think about one of the teams that crushed them at home. That team today, talking about the Saints, got beat by the Carolina Panthers, arguably, or maybe not even arguably, the worst team in football, 23-22, and now the Saints are thinking about firing their coach. I thought, and we may still talk about this today, I thought there were some things in today's game, Ed, that led you to believe the Cowboys could. We know Jerry doesn't want to make a change, and he's not going to make a change, but I feel like there were some things occurring in that game that you would probably be justified in making a change. I mean, it was a lot of craziness. And again, we're big fans of Bones, and we'll talk about this more, but it just became sort of high comedy. Like, Ed, I don't know. People point to that Colts going for it against the a fake punt under Coach Pagano a while back, against the Patriots as one of the worst fake punts ever. But that throw from Anger out to Goodwin, that was not one of the better fake punts we've witnessed.
Well, and we can get into it in more detail, and there's a number of great topics for us to discuss before we finish this show. But that's certainly one of them where you got to question the game management and Mike McCarthy's strategic decisions, assuming that he's the one who approved that and it wasn't just John Fossil, the special teams coach, approving the fake punt. But it was in a very detrimental situation because you're just coming out of the half. It's still a close game. And you need to protect your defense, not expose your defense. And they risked giving the ball up on their own 38-yard line. And that's what happened. And then Kirk Cousins goes and throws his third touchdown pass of the game. And it's pretty much over at that point. But we do need to talk about some of the issues that are beginning to surface with Mike McCarthy as the head coach. That includes this discipline that the franchise has finally taken against Ezekiel Elliott. Also some other of his strategies, some good, some bad. We've got Jerry Jones addressing the possibility of making a trade with the trade deadline coming on Tuesday, which is, by the way, the only time they've been able to save a 3-5 season was in 2018 when they went out and made a trade and acquired Amari Cooper for a first-round pick, and they won the division and a playoff game that year. So is Jerry of a mind to add personnel by next Tuesday? And then we've got to talk further, I think, just about the way this game played out and the, what was really revealed today was just how bad this offensive line is. And we can talk more about that at the appropriate time.
All right. Without further ado, Mike Hamilton from Rogue Media Network, please play the music. All right, Doomsday rolls on, and Ed, let's start right where, and we'll get back into the performance of several aspects of this team. Another just bumbling effort by the Cowboys. There were, but like before we hit all the on the field stuff, Ed, you hit on it right there a minute ago. Is that Zeke was disciplined and did not make the trip. And for someone who's hailed as like this great leader, and Jerry and Steven wanted him back to be in the locker room, and of course there was Dak after the game trying to have his buddies back and representing this as some kind of mutual decision. The Cowboys and Zeke apparently said, "Oh, I think we ought to just take a break and leave you at home." Last week, the weirdness of Rico Dowdle suddenly coming down with a high fever before the game while he was out signing autographs. So you had a lot of strange activity. Ed, you've been in touch with folks and kind of working the phones and everything. There are reports out there, at least one report I saw from the NFL Network suggesting that this has been a tardiness issue, missing team meetings. What have you been able to gather on that front, and what is your just takeaway from Zeke being left at home for this game this pivotal game against Atlanta?
Well, if he's been habitually late and missed team meetings, then why has he been exempt from punishment until week 9? To me, that's an indictment of Mike McCarthy and the coaching staff for not administering proper discipline. you know, till it got to this point, unless, of course, Jerry Jones was not permitting it. We know Jerry was a driving force, along with Dak Prescott, for the return of Zeke Elliott. I mean, he's a former 4th overall draft pick, a 2-time NFL rushing champion. He spent 8 seasons with the Cowboys, and they played against him last year when he was with the Patriots. So they should have known what he was. And what he was and what he is a descending player at running back at age 29, which most of them are. There is an exception, a notable one, Derrick Henry. But Zeke is the first player in NFL history, first running back in NFL history, to have a lower per game rushing average for 7 consecutive years, and he's on his way now to his 8th consecutive year. But Dak, you know, earlier in the year, a couple different times, has really praised Zeke for recognizing how hard this is on a guy of his stature, who is now essentially barely playing behind Rico Dowdle, a guy who is nothing special. I mean, he had a good game today. He's had a couple good games, but has not even had a 100-yard rushing game in his career. And so we can understand how that would irritate Zeke and maybe cause him to question the judgment of the coaching staff, especially since we all assumed he was brought back to be the goal line, short yardage back, and then he wasn't even that after week 1. He started week 1. He started last week because of the odd Dowdle situation, which I've independently and subsequently confirmed he really was sick. As convenient as that illness seemed to be for the Cowboys to avoid making Zeke Elliott inactive last week against the 49ers instead of this week, and we see the fallout from that decision. And then, like, it just goes to the dysfunction of this whole franchise that before the game, when Jerry's asked about Zeke, who's been left home for disciplinary action, Jerry's praising the guy for his professionalism and his dedication and for setting a great example. Like, how tone deaf can you possibly be to be praising Ezekiel Elliott when you're disciplining him? It's just insane. And obviously he doesn't serve any important purpose on the team now. I never did get an answer to the most important question, which was, does he rejoin the team after the Atlanta game? Nobody would answer that question, although Jerry's comments before the game would suggest that his roster spot is in no immediate jeopardy, but who knows with Jerry. He doesn't always tell the truth, and he would admit that.
Yeah, I think so. And sometimes he tells the truth too much, you know.
Not that. Hey, having Zeke Elliott would have made zero difference in this game.
No, I don't.
It had nothing to do with it. And I was thinking, you know, there's been a lot of criticism of their run game, which is the worst in football, and they've now gone franchise record 22 consecutive games without a 100-yard rusher, which is unimaginable given what the Cowboys have had at that position across the decades. But I think today was revealed the real reason for that, and we always suspected that the offensive line had something to do with it. But when you look at what their game plan was, and it was interesting to me when I was out there Thursday and we talked to Dak, that he was talking about how much he really liked this game plan, how fully supportive he was. He was convinced it was going to be effective. And the game plan was obviously to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible, the short passing game. Short, quick passes. And if you have to do that, if that's your strategy against the worst pass rushing defense in all of football, the Falcons came into the game with a league low 6 sacks. And your entire offensive game plan has to revolve around getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands as fast as possible. That is a total indictment of the offensive line. And it, to me, fully explains all of the issues they're having on offense with their skill position players, you know, reaching expectations.
Yeah, and one of the plays was speaking of the offensive line and just that look, and Greg Olson tried to say, well, the jet sweep was actually a good call there. Boy, it certainly didn't turn out well. It caused Mike McCarthy to some fans sometimes want to see more emotion on the sideline from coaches and players and that type of thing. Then sometimes, of course, CD, you know, it's like, oh, is he showing too much emotion? McCarthy was seen slamming his tablet to the ground after seeing a replay of the call that the play that he called on a jet sweep, and that was a play that there was a timeout, right? The Falcons seemed to be coming on a huge blitz like a cover zero type blitz. And so Cowboys called a timeout, set it up, and then ran a jet sweep, and it just got blown up. And then, Ed, you and I need to learn this. If the Cowboys continue like this, we may start a Falcons podcast, and we need to learn about this number 55, whoever that guy is. Like he may be the greatest linebacker in the game. I mean, based on today, that was pretty unbelievable. Now, back on the other side of things, though, Ed, the Lawson has a strip sack. The Cowboys actually, he had a couple of sacks. The Cowboys defense was trying to make a play. First fumble they've called since October 6th against Pittsburgh, I believe.
Which was the play at the end of the game where they just lateraled it all around the field till time ran out, and that's when the Cowboys recovered that fumble. That was their only takeaway in their last 5 or 6 games. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So they get the ball, and they do nothing with it. They do absolutely nothing. And in this game, Ed, and you love these kind of numbers, but this one stuck out to me. There were 4 times they had to turn the ball over on downs in this game, and that was like the most since the 2000 season. I mean, they keep making all sorts of history for the wrong reasons, but they couldn't get it on third down. They couldn't get it on fourth down, and on the combined, I think the last I saw at the end of the game, they were 3 for 17. Like the one thing they'd been decent on offense. They were 10th in the league on third down, believe it or not. 10th in the league on converting third downs. Third and fourth down today, 3 for 17. I mean, they have no hope of moving the chains. It's and to even score, you have to have Rico Dowdle do a juggling act with a football, and he gets hit on the play, and he somehow brings the ball in. My gosh.
And Dak extended that play, used the mobility it was I think it was the second longest, touchdown pass in terms of time elapsed from the time he took the snap till he released the ball. It was over 7 seconds, which he doesn't get away with very often anymore. But it's just kind of said everything to me. Like I said, with how poorly the Falcons rushed the passer, that on Dallas' second possession of the game, Dak Prescott gets sacked on consecutive plays by the Falcons defense. And they wind up getting 3 sacks. They had 6 the whole, in their previous 7 games. That's how bad the Cowboy offensive line is. And then you factor in all the penalties. Tyler Guyton, who continues to be a penalty flag magnet with 3 more penalties in the game. And these penalty issues, they've plagued McCarthy since he got here. He's just been totally unable to solve it. And, the only explanation I've ever gotten from him earlier this year was that this is the most roster turnover that they've ever had. The most young players, the most players from outside the building, the most they've had, veteran players acquired right before the end of training camp and had to play, that it's all of that factors into a very undisciplined team. But it just seems like malpractice what they do to themselves in big moments. And, we talked about the fake punt at the start of the second half and Brian Anger throwing an incomplete pass for C.J. Goodwin, who was covered. It was almost a pick six. Closer to a pick six than it was a completion. And Anger's never completed a pass in his NFL career. He tried it. This was his 3rd time. And then the Falcons, thwart a fake punt for the 2nd straight week. They get the ball in the 38. They go score what proves to be the decisive touchdown. We saw Trayvon Diggs unable to cover his man a couple different times. He got beat on the first touchdown in a one-on-one situation. And then the second one was on that play where even, again, after a timeout, he still doesn't know what his assignment is. And it's a 0 blitz, and they get beat for another touchdown. And it's by Darnell Mooney. So it's got to be frustrating for McCarthy. I know last week he was frustrated by they had the bye week. They talked about how much communication had improved. Dak talked about it on the offensive line. It was great. And then they go out to San Francisco, and on the 15-play script, so these are the plays that they're most convinced will succeed that they start the game with on offense. First 15 plays are all scripted. They go out, and he said they blew the assignment, had a communication assignment on plays 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's again attributable partly to the offensive line, and again to the coaching staff not getting it right with the players so that they can properly execute. I can't imagine how frustrated McCarthy is by that. But then as you mentioned, he's got his own issues and always has when it comes to game management situations.
Game management reared its ugly head late in the first half, and the Cowboys just some curious use of the clock, trying to figure out what to do, and then they end up, I guess, with 4 seconds left, trying what I guess was going to be a Hail Mary, but they actually just threw it across the middle.
Well, again, that goes to right. They can't protect the passer long enough for him to load it up and throw it.
No way in the world could they protect it. But even then, Ed, before Dak, and now the story will become Dak's got a hamstring, and can they recover from that? I would argue that Cooper Rush came into the game and actually made some excellent throws, led the team down the field, and in fact, on when CD was coming in and out of the game. And I do think one thing we need to address, because I'm seeing it all over Twitter, they told Dak, who said he wanted to come back into the game, that he wouldn't be able to protect himself because of the hamstring injury. He was going to be compromised. And so he said he wanted to come back in, but obviously he just had a look of resignation. And I think fans are picking up on that because CD was over there going crazy, trying to fight his way back. And, of course, he was in immense pain. And I don't know, Ed, it seems like the Cowboys, McCarthy or the medical staff or whoever, didn't even have the ability to keep him off the field, right? It's almost like he sneaks back into the game and he catches that 2-point conversion to make it 27-21. And then the guy took a little shot at his shoulder, almost like he knew what he was doing. I guarantee you he did. 24, the defensive back. So that was it. I think fans are picking up on that, and that may be unfair to Dak. It probably is, but Dak did kind of look sitting over there like, this thing's over. My day is done. And you had the CD who was like, even with 3 minutes left, it looked like the game was over, with all this passion trying to get back on the field. And I think people are sort of picking up on that and reacting.
I think CD proved that despite the pain he was in and the limitations he might have had, he was still able to function at his position and do his job with the shoulder injury. It wasn't like if he'd had the hamstring injury, he wouldn't have been out there either, because he couldn't run in that situation, which is the problem with Dak. You're putting him behind a bad offensive line. They're behind on the scoreboard. They're going to pass rush him hard, and they've already proven capable of getting to him when he was healthy. And so the last thing I want him to do is make this hamstring injury even worse than it already is, and then further jeopardize the fact that he wouldn't play next week or beyond next week when they finally play another NFC East opponent. But I thought what CD did and what he was allowed to do, I thought that was the best representation of the fact that the players haven't yet quit on McCarthy, that for all the criticism there is of him, and we've mentioned a lot of it, the players are yet to quit on him. It was still a 2-score game, and they cut it to a 1-score game, and they had the chance to recover an onside kick, which they did earlier this year by Brandon Aubrey. This time it didn't work, but I think they could have easily been accused of quitting had they held CD out when CD felt like he could have played. And we all know that's what got Wade Phillips fired in the middle of the season. The only coach Jerry Jones has ever fired during the season was Wade Phillips, and it was because the players quit on the coach. So McCarthy's got to make sure the players don't quit on him. And I think this had to be a concern. This kind of start had to be a concern for this organization, given, that Jerry Jones forced McCarthy and the coaches to work the final year of contracts that nobody secured beyond this year. And that if the players started losing, they wouldn't feel accountable to these coaches. And so far, we haven't seen that yet, except for maybe what happened with Zeke.
Yeah. If Zeke is indeed, I guess he missed another meeting. It's been reported, and so now they've left him at home. Dalvin. Maybe if Zeke had been out there rather than Dalvin, Zeke would have known not to be in the huddle. Dalvin, that's another huge miscue in this game, Ed. They're getting ready to go for him 4th and 1. Not that I had like a great feel. Of course, other teams, when it's like 4th and 1, they do a tush push or something, and it's a relatively easy conversion. For the Cowboys, this seems harder.
They got to trick it up to get 4th and 1, and even then it doesn't work.
Correct. They got to do a jet sweep or something. And on 4th and 1, they had too many players in the huddle. Again, these are fake punt disaster. Game mismanagement late in the first half. That play where the too many guys in the huddle, and you got your coach over there throwing his tablet down on the sideline. It is it's a bumbling look, and I think I think everybody's going to be ready for a change. I don't see this thing turning around. And Ed, you got Eagles coming in, you got Texans, you got Commanders sitting there at 7-2 for the first time since like 1996. Your friend North Turner was there. I saw Trey Wingo say something about that. North Turner and Jack Kent Cook was still the owner the last time they started 7-2. So the Cowboys are staring 3-7 in the face, and that'll be when the Giants. I mean, won't that be a sight for sore eyes?
That'll be a tryptophan fest. Thanksgiving Day. You know what? I'll say this though, and I guess we could talk about what a tryptophan fest between a bad game between two poorer franchises and the effects of the turkey. We'll all be asleep before halftime. I guess the other thing is, and you mentioned it, can the Cowboys recover from this? And it doesn't look like it, especially, I guess some people would say, well, maybe they're better with Cooper Rush. I mean, he did execute the offense pretty well, and he has won 4 out of his 5 career starts in place of Dak. And the Cowboys have been dominant against NFC East opponents. But I would say I agree with you that I don't think that they can turn this around, even though they're going to say, hey, well, look at what happened last year. Tampa Bay, the Rams, and the Packers all had losing records after 8 games. And in fact, the Rams and the Packers were 3-6, and they all made the playoffs as wild card teams. So it's not impossible, although the Cowboys are in a situation now where they've lost 3 straight games and have now already matched with 5 losses their loss total for each of the last 5 years. You know, they've gone 12-5 3 years in a row. So now at 3-5 in 8 games, they've matched the number of losses they took in 17 of the last few seasons. And so they have to win out to match last year, any of the last 3 records. And that's unlikely to happen. And maybe we should talk to Stretch before we discuss the trade deadline coming up on Tuesday and what Jerry had to say about that.
I mean, if you really want to talk to Stretch.
Well, I don't want to talk to him. But and Jerry's not going to want to hear it.
No, I know. It's going to be tough. And Stretch even has asked for like extra time, both to prepare and for his delivery today. So it'll be, things could get ugly. And he likes to make up things, like he likes to give grades that don't even exist, like a I or a, you know.
He goes really deep into the alphabet.
He does. He does, for all his and the vocabulary, man. There could be foul language before we
need some heavy editing. You get better leave some time for our friends at Rogue Media to edit out some of the comments that he may make.
Yeah, I hope, speaking of Rogue Media, you've noticed the boom mic, the new camera, all the angles. No matter where I move, camera likes to follow me around.
Wow, look at that.
This is like a zoo. Yeah, this is a big time deal. This is a big time operation.
You get those things when you're the host, when you're the primary host, because I don't have any of those things. I'm just glad to have this little microphone.
Oh, that fuzzy mic.
It made a big difference, I think.
That has led us to the promised land. I mean, all it takes is one complaint from our listeners, and we're like, we go out and buy like thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Okay, I did want to say before we get to Stretch, thank you, Marable Homes. Thank you for what you do. I'm hoping they'll let me appear in this upcoming commercial that Rogue is filming. It's marablehomes.com. In fact, right now, Ed, I'm looking at the website in Edgepine, Dartridge, Shoreview. Boy, Shoreview is where all the luxury homes are in Lake Highlands. Sold. I mean, it's unbelievable what they're doing. There's some other streets, Bucks Hill, Overwood, Santa Clara. That's over in Forest Hills, I believe, Ed. That's gorgeous. I think when you decide to move over closer to me, Little Forest Hills would be a gorgeous location for you. And again, all the accolades come to Marable Homes. Best of course, a D Magazine. And golly, it's amazing to look at these spaces and to look at these kitchens. I mean, I'm not a man that spends a lot of time in the kitchen, nor does my wife. But we do have They make some beautiful kitchens. And you know what I'm talking about. Our wives are both very capable, but we all like going
Oh,
out to eat.
Jill's an unbelievable baker. I
Yes,
got to say.
extremely capable. Yeah, Jill does a great job, and I've always wanted to be invited out there for one of those baking sessions. I'm looking at one of those claw tooth club tubs, Ed, in some of those. You see those in some of those commercials
The standalone tubs.
for men of our age. But these are beautiful. It's a beautiful interior.
I wish I was of your age.
Marable Homes. I know I'm knocking on 50's door. It is okay. It is time now, though, to talk to Glenn Stretch Smith. You know him, you love him. He's a harsh gentleman, former Cowboys coach and scout. Here he is. It is Stretch Place, Glenn Stretch Smith, and we have talked about a lot of this, a lot of what we witnessed. But Stretch, you've had a chance to, and of course, you'll be breaking this down on WFAA on Sports Special with Joe Trahan, as you do every Sunday evening. But Stretch, this was a game, Cowboys desperately needed, and one of the big takeaways from this one: 3 for 17 in on third and fourth downs. Just could not get it done. And especially, man, on fourth downs, I think 0 for 4. They kept trying to, maybe they didn't finish 0 and 5 now that I think about it, but it was at least 0 for 4. Stretch, walk us through what was going on some of these plays. One comes to mind is that caused McCarthy to throw his tablet to the ground was when he called a jet sweep to CD on that 4th and 1. Olsen kind of broke it down on TV. What did you see when you were looking at some of those 4th and 1s, as they were a team desperately trying to keep those drives alive?
Yeah, I mean, schematically, Olsen does a nice job with that. When you've got guys, and he talked about it on the first jet sweep, when you've got guys standing up into the line and they're able to adjust when they see the motion or they feel the motion versus when their hands are down and they're trying to get up the field where they were able to convert that jet sweep later in the game. It's one of those things where at some point you can do everything you can as a coach to get the right call in the right situation. And I believe the Cowboys had called a timeout leading into that 4th down that they weren't able to pick up. So, his frustration level is over the top because it isn't as if that's a bad call. It just didn't work during that time. I think some of the issue is with the quarterback has got to be able to at some point get you into the right plays. And I'm saying get you into the plays that you're able to convert. And then sometimes if the defense runs a little different look or gives you a little different something, you have to then be able to adjust. And it was unfortunate that I keep hammering on this quarterback. I don't know how much real, it's almost like it's not natural for him, the game. It just is not natural for him. If it's not there, he doesn't always know exactly what to do. I'll give you an example. In the second series, they've got it 2nd and 6, and they run a play action, and if he just takes a gander to the left, Brooks is cantering up the sidelines wide open. He doesn't even see it, doesn't make the throw. You come back later in the football game in 4th down, and very seldom will you see a team line up in quads, 4 wide receivers to one side of the field. And you see it in the CFL some because in Canadian football, the field is wider. In the NFL, they can really kind of, bunch you down and create some issues for you. But the ball's on the right hash, and the Cowboys get the football on 4th down. They open to quads. Of course, immediately Atlanta adjusts to quads, and there's only a safety and a corner to the backside where the tight end Ferguson is. Now, here's the issue with quads as well, is you've only got a 5-man protection. You don't have long enough if you're going to throw a screen to be able to hang on to those blocks. Well, sure enough, Judon makes a little bit of an inside move. And so in order to block those two, Dallas releases both Steele and Martin. They've got a hat for a hat on the right side, and it is going to be a walk-in touchdown. And Prescott does not have enough innate football ability just to take a few more steps back, just to draw Judon to him a little bit and literally just dump the ball over the top of him to Ferguson, and it's going to go for a while. And I'm talking about a while. Well, Judon bats the football. It's the little things instinctively that get to me with this guy. And everybody says, well, Stretch, you're so hard on the quarterback. You know, Galloway. Oh, Stretch, you got Dak phobia. You got this. What I got is I'm sitting and I'm thinking, in any business, take football out of it. It's about return on investment. It's about what are you getting for what you're putting in. And when he is the highest paid football player in the NFL, and you can't make that simple read on 2nd and 6, you can't make that absolutely what I would say is just a remote chance of saying, well, I got to be a football player here. I got to draw him here to me, and I got to – he can't do it. And it continues to leave a really bad taste. And unfortunately, right now, the Cowboys are in a situation where they are going to have to go out and score 30 a game because they're playing with a bunch of guys on defense that most people don't even know. Tyrus Sweet and Carl Lawson and guys that Kalen Carson, guys we don't even call their name and wouldn't call their name in most situations. So you're going to have to score 30 a game. He keeps continually showing you that he's not capable of doing that.
You know, and the quarterback, it has been a struggle, and now we don't know how long he'll be out. He's got a hamstring injury. They'll have to examine that and find out what moving forward. You know, Dowdle made the great catch in the end zone. They actually ran the ball okay at times. But again, you know, from a coaching standpoint, Stretch, let's get away from Dak for just a second. When you have 12 men in the huddle, the Dalvin Cook, that messes up when they're going for it on 4th and 1. You had the clock mismanagement at the end of the first half when you really could, you know, try to get a score. And of course, you have a weapon in that kicker. How frustrated should fans be with Mike McCarthy and that offensive staff?
Well, I mean, there's no question it's frustrating when you don't really have any answers. And I talked about Canadian football earlier. Maybe he was trying to play a little Canadian football. Hey, we get 12 in here, and maybe we'll hope they don't find out. I'm being sarcastic, but obviously that was a situation where they were going to put CD at running back. Putting CD at running back requires calling another personnel grouping. And you saw Dalvin, who's just been active now for the second game, he heard a personnel grouping that sounded foreign to him and kind of stepped out and then tried to get out. Well, it was too late. So the coordination of all that is what is so frustrating for a fan. And quite frankly, what's so frustrating for this football team. And when you have – and you're decimated with injuries at one position, the defensive end position, and it is absolutely causing your margin razor thin for an ability to get through and get to where you feel like you have a chance to win the football game at the end of the game, and it's not allowing itself to get there. I think that's the most frustrating thing for everybody.
Okay, and let me ask you this, Stretch, over on the defensive side. And I think I'd like to get a grade from you, like on the secondary, perhaps. I mean, Kalen Carson has come back, and he missed a really bad tackle that stands out in my mind. And then walk me through what you saw on the Cowboys. It looked like Diggs, first of all, was uncomfortable before the play. And then the player that he was responsible for, he couldn't, he got caught in that traffic. It wasn't even really a rub route because he just kind of ran himself into trouble there, which I guess is just perfect for the offense. And you saw that this thing that Cousins did, where he did his hands to speed up the play. Okay, what's Diggs doing there? And what do you think's happening to him that he can't get out there to his man? Is that a bad angle, bad recognition? Is it all of those things? Walk me through that, please.
Well, I mean, again, you have to remember Cousins recognizes the fact that the blitz is coming. They've got trips to the right. It's a little bit of a bunch set, and he sees the blitz. The blitz kind of has to show off the edge, and they're trying to do that in Dallas and Zimmer, really to get some pressure in that situation. And he sees it. Now, Diggs is a tad late getting over because they're trying to disguise the blitz. And as he's a little late getting there, what happens? The two outside guys are running slant. His guy, the inside guy, runs a wheel. So you got four men in traffic trying to get there. He's got to do two things. He's either got to gauge it to get underneath it, or he's got to be smart enough to say, I got to go over the top and get to the junction where I can intersect here and I can make a play. He gets caught in a rub situation. It happens all the time in football. Is it frustrating? You bet it's frustrating. But to me, is that really the difference that you would say in winning or losing the football game? I'm going to say no. I saw some good things out of Donovan Wilson. I saw him come off the edge one time, and he was so fast off the edge, even in a four-man pressure, what it did was created an ability for Cousins had to step up. When he did, Lawson sacked him. So you have to give credit a lot of times where it's hard to give credit. Defensively in the secondary, I thought Diggs played a little better other than the one play that you pointed out. Yeah, Carson missed the tackle out there. Would you like to see him come up and create the correct angle and go throw at him to put his helmet on his upfield hip? Sure you would. It didn't happen. But other than that, I thought Jordan Lewis played well. I thought you saw Hooker get up and make some plays in the run game. I thought Wilson played okay. Again, defensively, you played well enough with the guys that you got. Let's keep in mind what we're talking about here. We're talking about Overshown, who played his off. We're talking about Lawson, who I thought played as good a game as he's played with the Cowboys. Kendricks flying around. Wilson doing what he did. Leofold made a play. Jordan Lewis doing some good things, even going out and playing outside as a real corner. And I'm talking about being a nickel guy. He's actually being the corner. I thought they played well enough. And I think when you look at it and you say, well, we did some good things defensively, created a turnover, almost two, and I thought you saw some things out of a defense that we haven't seen, quite frankly, since maybe week one of the season. And so I'm certainly going to do everything I can to pump this defense up, because I didn't think they played that bad at all. I thought you got Golston. I thought you got some good things. I mean, Linval Joseph made a play. It got some things out of some guys that you just don't think that they should be contributing. And when they contribute, you have to give them credit in that situation.
Okay, lastly for you, I have this. Jerry said that he might, they might have some things in the works before Tuesday's trade deadline. You've been in the Cowboys scouting department in the past. You know what you've seen, what other teams have already done in terms of bringing in receivers. One was a former Cowboy, Amari Cooper, who was hurt today, had a wrist injury and was held out of that Bills game. Do you, if you were making that call right now, what position would you be trying to fortify? Where would you be digging on? Would you be looking for pass rushing help, or would you be digging in more at wide receiver?
I'd be digging in more on what can I get rid of right now to get me some draft picks. You're going to say, well, Stretch, talking about tanking the season? No, yeah. I'm talking about right now, where we sit right now, which is the entire NFC North is probably got opportunity to get in the playoffs. At 3-4, with the schedule you're facing, are they 3-4, 3-5? I've even lost count.
3-5.
Okay, they're 3-5 right now. Matt, do you think, and I'm just going to ask you this, I'm going to put this back on you. When you look at this football team, do you think there is a need, there are multiple needs, or there lots of needs?
Lots of needs, multiple. Yeah.
Correct. So with that being said, how are we as a personnel department gonna gather getting ourselves in a position to address a football team that has multiple needs? I don't believe the Cowboys are going to do anything from a proactive standpoint other than answer the phone to say who might we have as a resource or resources on this football team that possibly we could move on from in order to gather draft picks to address multiple needs.
Yeah. And I think the answer would be, do they even have anybody valuable enough to move? And if it's not Parsons, and it's not Lawrence, and who are both hurt right now, I don't know who it is. There's really not. There's no one. You have two massive contracts you can't move off of at receiver and quarterback, and so yeah, that becomes a big problem. It's not like you are displaying a lot of valuable talent that people would want to get their hands on.
And you already did that with the tight end. You traded Hendershot with the tight end you traded to Kansas City to try to get something. I mean, I don't know. I mean, would you, if someone picked up the phone and said, boy, Jake Ferguson makes unbelievable catches. He does. He's a, hey, might we move on from him? Might we look at putting somebody else in there? Is it time for Soonmaker to go to work full time? I think you have to keep all options open. But the point I'm making is, yeah, the trade deadline is Tuesday. I don't see the Cowboys doing anything, because at best with Parsons, if he was healthy, maybe you might be you certainly you would garner a lot of attention for him. Lawrence, I would think you would gain some attention for. Both of those guys are still hurt, and so I don't see in any way, shape, form, or fashion the Cowboys doing much of anything here at the trade deadline.
All right. I feel like this team is struggling so much, you don't even want to give them a grade at this point. I think I would say the man that has really grown on you may have backslid in your heart a little bit today, and that is Bones Fossil with that harem scarum throw out to the flat. Back to that for just a second, Stretch. What a strange thing to do. Whoever that call came from, obviously you'd think McCarthy would have to approve, but maybe it's something sometimes what the punter sees something, but they desperately decided, okay, we need to keep this going. We need this drive, and that was what they came up with, was literally a long throw to the flat to a non-receiver. I mean, that was bad.
Yeah, a 15-yard, 20-yard back shoulder throw from Brian Anger to C.J. Goodwin is the best thing that you've got in that situation. I think if you're realistic with yourself, if you take that one play, that shows you the desperation that this team is in right now. They don't have the confidence to leave their offense out there because they were, like you said, 3 for something ridiculous on 3rd and 4th down. And then you could not – the one thing you could not do in the football game is go 3 and out when your offense just got you back in the game to end the first half.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be damned if they don't go out there and go 3 and out.
Yeah.
And then they have to, they have to pull up, what is some, shenanigan trick, thinking that, okay, our punter is going to be good enough to throw a back shoulder throw. And what I found was entertaining was you had guys on the Cowboys sideline that were throwing their hands up for pass interference. There is no pass interference on that play, you mutt. What are you thinking? I mean, the guys hold it. You're in a punt position. They're holding the guy up. What do you mean pass interference?
It doesn't exist.
It's crazy.
Doesn't exist on that. That's a good point. Has there ever been a time, Stretch, that, watching Mike McCarthy throw that tablet into the ground, have I ever caused you to want to do something like that? Either throw some equipment or throw your headset down? Has there ever been a moment where I've driven you to that?
Well, you should reverse handicap that. You should say, is there ever a week that I don't feel like going, bah! No, Mosley. Check your hairdo. You got a haircut.
Thank you. Thanks for noticing.
And it even looks like you took a bath today. I'm going to say that's not a shower, like your fingernails are actually cleaned out. I'm going to give you some credit.
You can't see my fingernails.
Yeah, I can. I saw him just running it through that mop of yours. You actually sat, I'm going to say you sat in that butt soup bathtub and cleaned your fingernails out. Congratulations, Mosley.
It's too much. That's too graphic. I don't even know what that means. But Stretch, thank you. We'll be watching on TV. We appreciate you. It is Stretch Plays with Glenn Stretch Smith, former Cowboy scout and coach. Good night to you, sir.
See you later, buddy. Have a good evening. Sorry to bother you.
All right. There it was. Whew. Okay. Paint.
I never brought home a report card like that. And that's by far from the worst one they've had. I mean, the report cards he had after the Saints debacle and the Lions atrocity were much worse, but bad enough, I'd say. Bad enough.
Yeah. It was difficult for some people to listen to, but also therapeutic for people that are trying to kind of, live through. And people do wait to kind of see what we say about these things. And so the only redeeming thing for me, Ed, is as the Cowboys season continues to go up in flames, somehow my alma mater, Baylor, has turned its season around, has ripped off 3 straight victories and headed toward a bowl game. And so I have had some excitement in that area, and also a district championship for our local high school team. Congratulations to Corey Campbell and the Lake Highlands Wildcats. Now, Ed, Tuesday trade deadline. I love that Jerry has been like, nope, I wouldn't expect anything. We've got everything we need right here. And then I think he sort of understands the anger among his fan base. And suddenly it's like, well, we got some things in store. We've got some things that we're thinking about. And Ed, I saw some of your longtime colleagues even this morning. And honestly, the pregame shows are not as good without you in it. I've always enjoyed seeing your work from wherever the Cowboys are playing before games and how they go to people who are scared of the elements and put hoods on. Oh, it's a little chilly out here in Green Bay. Let me put a hood on. But this is they were kind of going through, okay, here's the pass rushing help. Here are all the people and all the usual suspects, people from the Cleveland Browns, for a pass
Darius
rush.
Smith.
Yes. And then somebody from who's Mike Williams play for?
The Jets.
Jets.
Big receiver for the Jets.
His name keeps coming up. So, a lot of players being mentioned, and now suddenly the Cowboys showing interest in the trade deadline. Ed, what do you read into this when you now suddenly hear Jerry saying that they may be up to something?
Well, after the game, Jerry's direct quote was, "We'll probably do a couple things this week. I am a long way from being dismayed about this team this year. Now, I think he's probably encouraged by, despite the potential absence now of Dak Prescott and maybe CeeDee Lamb. I don't know. We'll see how those injuries evolve. And Brandon Cooks is eligible to come off IR this week. So is DeMarcus Lawrence, but I don't get a sense that he's anywhere near ready to return because I haven't even seen him out at the Star. Micah Parsons could return to practice this week. We've been thinking Deron Bland was going to play each of the last 2 games. So this injury has gone far longer than anybody anticipated. But I've kind of always thought that Jerry would approach the return of some of those players like that's where we can make the best use of, bringing in players, bringing back our own players off the injury list is where we can benefit, not going out and making trades. And I still think, despite what Jerry said, like, is he really and you described it. I mean, look how far behind they are in the division. Washington's 7-2. Like, does it make sense for them to invest in this coaching staff and this year's team at the expense of 2025 and presumably a new coaching staff? Does it make sense to give away assets that could be used to build those teams going forward for a new coaching staff than it does to give McCarthy some new players and restart from 3-5? I don't know. I really don't foresee Jerry doing anything of great magnitude, and I guess I still feel that way despite what he said. Because ultimately, it just doesn't make sense unless it's an incredibly one-sided deal for a defensive player.
All right. Yeah, I think it's just something to right. All that talk, it seems to be playing to the fans and saying, I'm going to try to give you some hope of doing something this season. It's hard for me to believe they would do something as significant as what they did for Amari Cooper. Interestingly, Amari Cooper has been traded a couple times since then.
And he didn't play today because he had a wrist injury, and he only caught had 19 yards receiving last week for Buffalo, so he's made a minimal impact in 3 games. But he absolutely saved the Cowboys season in 2018 when he gave Dak Prescott a legitimate number 1 receiving threat that he lacked in the moment. But it was a different circumstance at the time. Nobody was running away with the division at the time. And, Dak Prescott was still on his rookie contract. He wasn't the highest paid player in the NFL. And Micah Parsons wasn't even on the team, so they weren't thinking about making sure they have the necessary resources to sign him after this season. So it's just interesting how much longer injured players take to return when seasons are going the way this one is.
All right, and since we're talking about some of the teams the Cowboys will be facing and that they're falling behind as we speak in the race, as we tape, second half has started, and the Eagles have a 16-0 lead over Jacksonville. And, Ed, we would expect them to probably go ahead and get that done. And so the Eagles and the Commanders pulling away from the Cowboys. The Cowboys are much closer to the dreadful Giants than they are. Although, by the way, Ed, we should congratulate Daniel Jones. He threw a touchdown pass at home for the first time in what I think, if I remember the number, 682 days.
I believe 21 other players have thrown touchdown passes at the Meadowlands, at the Giants' home park, between the time Daniel Jones threw his last one and his next one. 21 players on other teams.
Oh, my goodness.
Hey, but the Cowboys, I think they did win the turnover margin today.
Ooh.
Well, they're -8 going into the game, which was 3rd worst in the NFL. And maybe they moved up a spot or 2, or will. But they had the advantage. You mentioned Carl Lawson's strip sack. I think that was the only turnover in the game.
Yep. Had some tackling issues.
Yeah.
Our man Kalen Carson had a he wasn't tackling. As you mentioned, Diggs took curious routes to the football. Like it's like the Falcons didn't even need pick plays. I mean, I don't know if you call it a rub route when a cornerback just kind of goes harem scarum into a group of like 3 or 4 receivers and defenders and just gets lost, right? I mean, it was just Fox was doing some great camera work, and I kind of like it that Adam Amin was giving him credit for it, because you just saw Cousins give it the give it the little deal, and he
hurry it up. Let's snap the ball. We got him.
Eyes over there. We got him. We got him where we need him.
And one of the things I paid a lot of attention to and wrote about this week, obviously, was Kirk Cousins. For a lot of reasons, he's obviously having an incredibly good season with his third team, the Atlanta Falcons. But for a long time, for 4 years, he and Mike Zimmer and Eric Kendricks, a middle linebacker, were together in Minnesota. And so they each had knowledge of one another. And I knew it was going to be a real challenge for Zimmer's defense under the circumstances because, Kirk Cousins went into this game 2-9 against the Cowboys, which is a 182 winning percentage. That's the worst of any opposing quarterback against the Cowboys who's made at least 10 starts. The worst. And yet today it wasn't an issue, and it wasn't an issue because the Cowboys, we knew, wouldn't have much of a pass rush. They haven't had one since Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Marshawn Nealon went to the injury report and off the field. And today was really not much of an exception. They did get a couple sacks. Lawson was prominent in that regard. But the other thing is they just beat Kirk Cousins in Minnesota 2 years ago, 40-3 in Minnesota. It's the biggest road win in Cowboys franchise history. They sacked Kirk Cousins 7 times in that game, including a Micah Parsons strip sack on Minnesota's very first snap on offense. And yet none of the players responsible for those 7 sacks were going to be on the field in this game today. So that's the disaster that Mike Zimmer has inherited.
Yeah. And then I heard some stat during the game that, Parsons, how dramatically different it is when Parsons not on the field. And yet when he was on the field, I don't remember the Cowboys having sort of great success, right? I mean, they were getting hammered at home earlier this season, and he was as frustrated as anybody and was trying to fix it and trying to be accountable as he felt that he could. And so anyway, Ed, that was another one of my tweets, as I was just saying, I hope Diggs stays away from Twitter at halftime. And of course that played out. That was just kind of an embarrassing situation that we saw happen last week that we reacted to. And they kind of made up for it, but again, just kind of embarrassing all the way around for the Cowboys and Trayvon Diggs. All right, it is the Doomsday Podcast. Ed, great work. We'll look for you on WFAA, both your writing and then, of course, that morning show, that award-winning morning show on Channel 8.
Daybreak.
Uh-huh.
Right. Me and Mark Iscook will be on tomorrow morning about 6:30 a.m. Dallas time. Don't miss it.
That's on Channel 8 proper.
Correct. WFAA.
6:30, and really one of the only local shows that devote some morning time, some serious morning time to sports. I'll say that. Ducey will be mad at me. Mike, let's not act like you get up all the time for whatever they're doing over there. Good Day, Texas. I think I made that up too, but he tells me they have a very highly rated morning show, but that's before Werder started going on WFAA. All right, Ed, thank you. Good work today, and Cowboys continue to suck and fall to 3-5 and seem to be dead set on getting to probably 3-7. So let's all just get ready for the holidays. This should be a fun holiday season with the Dallas Cowboys. Doomsday will be here for all of it. We will not quit on this team, and we will not quit on you, our loyal listeners and watchers. And we appreciate it. For Ed Werder and Mike Hamilton of Rogue Media Network, I'm Matt Mosley. Good night to all.
We are Rogue Media Sports. Are you a podcaster? Let's talk podcast hosting. Are you tired of your current podcast host? Need real support in a community that gets it? At Rogue Media Network, we offer top-tier podcast hosting services to help you thrive. From hosting and distribution to dedicated support, we've got you covered. Starting as low as $25 a month. Join our community of passionate podcasters today. Contact us at hello@roguemedianetwork.com.